Last season, the Denver Nuggets were one of the surprise teams of the league, seemingly coming out of nowhere to win 54 games and take the second seed in the Western Conference. I mean, sure, they'd won 40 plus games in each of the two prior seasons, but ending up with the second best record in a tough Western Conference far exceeded most fans' expectations, and in the minds of many, put them in a position to be a true championship threat in a suddenly wide open race this season without the threat of the juggernaut Warriors. And as a result of those new expectations, a lot of people also want to see this team make some win-now trades to improve the roster this year. Whether that be for Wizards guard Bradley Beal before the season even started when we thought that he was going to be available for trade, or just a couple of wings around the league that people thought would really help this Nuggets team reach a new ceiling that it didn't really seem like they were going to be able to get to with this current group. Now, this isn't uncommon at all, and the Nuggets aren't the only team that are getting this kind of treatment. With an ever-expanding group of Twitter GMs out there, and that isn't an insult by the way, because I count myself among them, teams like Denver are some of the easiest targets for a quick trade trigger. The mindset goes like this. Oh, they need a veteran point guard or a defensive-minded wing or a versatile frontcourt player. Here are options 1, 2, and 3 for them, and here's why they would all make sense. And the idea for this video actually came about in a bit of a revelation on my part. I was going through some trade scenarios for the Nuggets, as I do on a typical night, and realized that there was literally no reason for this team to be in a hurry. They may have had a great year last season, and for some teams, that would cause a bit of panic as they scramble to capitalize on increasingly elusive near championship level success, but the common narrative around this team that they have to upgrade certain positions on their roster for this season just simply isn't true. Now, they've been covered pretty extensively as a team in my NBA Trade Machine series, and they'll continue to be, and there are plenty of trades for them that do make sense on some levels. But in today's video, I want to talk about why we should all relax a little bit on the Nuggets going all in right now. So the first point that I want to make here is just remind everybody how young the core pieces of this Nuggets team are, because I feel like we forget about them sometimes. Nikola Jokic is still just 25, as is Gary Harris. Michael Porter Jr. is just 21, and Jamal Murray, probably most surprisingly, is just 22 years old. And this is a core of a team that, as I said, won 54 games last year, and for a good amount of the season last year was the 1 seed in a tough Western Conference. And the other positive to this is all 4 of the guys that I just mentioned, either via their rookie contracts or a new extension, are under contract for the foreseeable future. So there's really no reason to move on from these guys unless you just don't think A, they fit together very well, or 2, you don't think that this is a team that can truly be a championship threat down the road. And on top of that, even other pieces on this roster like Malik Beasley and Jeremy Grant are still just in their mid-20s, so there's really no reason to start panicking about this team, even if you do have concerns about them like I do that I'll get to later in the video. And I think that a lot of times, because of this accelerated pace of team building in the NBA, where it seems like teams drastically change every 1 or 2 years, we have this tendency to try and force teams into being a championship level team before they're really ready and force them into making moves that they don't really need to. And if these guys weren't locked up on long-term contracts and you were questioning how much it would take to pay them down the road, then this would make a little bit more sense. But for now, just relax. Just because a team had success in 1 season doesn't mean that this young core that a lot of other teams around the league would love to have, by the way, needs to be traded in for a couple of borderline all-stars just for a slightly increased chance at a championship this season or the next. And so I'd like to see this team take a page out of the book of some past NBA eras where young cores were actually given the opportunity to develop and experience playoff failure as a group, so that then they could start to climb the ladder and climb the mountain towards a potential championship through growth as a team rather than all these different crazy moves after just 1 or 2 seasons. And as an extension to that point, this whole championship or bust motto that a lot of teams follow now in the NBA, and applies to a lot of teams by the way, doesn't really apply to this Nuggets team. And if you've watched many of my videos in the past, this might surprise you a little bit because typically I am in that camp of championship or bust. Either be a championship level team right now or set yourself up to be one in the future. But that doesn't apply to this team because I think they're already well set up to win a championship within the next 2 to 4 seasons. And on top of that, their youth and contract flexibility that I continue to mention gives them the opportunity to make some of those bigger moves down the road if it doesn't work out, if they need to. So again, they just don't need to be in a hurry. This is a team that just broke a 5-year-long playoff drought last season, and I really don't think all of a sudden now they need to start trying to be champions. Now, in terms of the on-the-court stuff this season, I can completely understand and relate to some frustration around this Nuggets team, specifically compared to how well they played last year at the beginning of the season. I've had more than my fair share of issues and gripes about the way Nikola Jokic has begun this year, as it looks like his energy levels, especially on the defensive end, are at an all-time low. And again, those are completely legitimate concerns. And just overall, it doesn't feel like this team is as engaged on either end of the floor as they were to begin last season. And I'm sure there's reasons for that. They were still out to prove themselves as a legitimate threat at the beginning of last year and to improve defensively, because that's all they heard about. They could score the ball, but they couldn't get stops, and most notably, Jokic was one of the worst defensive bigs in the league. And one of the big storylines to begin last year was the fact that they and he had improved in those areas, and then this year they're probably just coasting a little bit more, which again makes sense. And on top of that, I've also had concerns about the long-term viability of the Jamal Murray, Gary Harris backcourt, whether it be from a talent perspective, specifically my issues with Harris as not really being that valuable of a trade piece at the moment, or just of the long-term fit and salary implications of keeping those two guys together long term, with Murray already being on a max rookie extension and Harris being locked up for the next couple of seasons. But when his new contract hits, that's going to be another big salary number for this team. So I definitely have concerns for them there as well. But even with those concerns, I don't see this as a team that needs to start making all-in moves and moving around some of their young pieces to try and win a championship. Now, I've seen multiple scenarios that people have thrown around in which this team just trades away Michael Porter Jr. for a low-level or borderline all-star caliber player. And thankfully, it appears as though the team itself has taken him off the table in trade negotiations, but I just wish we would stop putting so much pressure on this team. However, that doesn't mean that I think that they should stop trying to improve their roster in general. I do think there are some moves that they can make that doesn't involve trading away some of their better younger assets to improve their team both now as well as in the future. They've got assets like Gary Harris's contract, like the Miles Plumlee expiring, like restricted free agent to be Malik Beasley, even a Will Barton contract that could be traded away. They could get them some nice value in return right now. For example, I'm for a Jrue Holiday trade for this team if it involves trading away someone like Gary Harris and an expiring and maybe Malik Beasley as well, because that makes sense for this team, because Holiday is still going to be good in a couple years when this team further develops, and he's a significant upgrade over Harris in the backcourt, as well as a good fit alongside Jamal Murray. Harris has been on a downward trend for about the last year and a half on the offensive end anyway, and it looks like Plumlee and Beasley probably won't be on the team next year as well when they're going to need new contracts. So trading them away for someone like Jrue Holiday makes a lot of sense to me. But I can't emphasize enough how much I'm advocating for trades like these rather than trading Paul Millsap for Chris Paul or Michael Porter Jr. for some other borderline all-star across the league. Also, consider this. If the Nuggets don't make a single move during the season this year in terms of a trade, they would go into this offseason with $11 million in salary cap space after letting Plumlee and Paul Millsap walk. However, they also have some of those tradable contracts that I talked about in Harris, Barton, and even Jeremy Grant. If they were able to find a taker for Barton, that would put them in position to have over $20 million in salary cap space, and even though the free agency market in 2020 isn't great, they'd be able to improve their roster significantly given that kind of money. Whether it's bringing in a nice 3-and-D player to round out their roster defensively, or replacement for Millsap at the 4, or more guard help as they trade away Barton and potentially Harris, there are moves to be made for this team that don't involve just trading away all their young assets, because it hasn't worked all that well either last postseason or to begin this season despite their record. Again, there are concerns that I've talked about. So essentially my point is, this team is well set up for right now and the future. They can sit around and let their younger players develop and be championship contenders in 2 to 3 years, or they can make some lateral moves to make themselves slightly better in the near future to capitalize on their expiring contracts and improve their chances of being great in that near championship window. But my overarching point is, I don't want to see a Millsap for Chris Paul swap or an MPJ plus expirings for a borderline all-star type trade from this season. They have time, and we all just kind of need to relax and let this Nuggets team develop. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.